Welcome, Buff fans, as we continue our series on opponent previews. Please be joined by a friend of mine, Josh Furlong, who covers Utah for KSL.com. And Josh, it's good to see you. Saw you in person not too long ago down in Frisco for Big 12 Media Day. And so, yeah, I appreciate you doing this again. It seems like I don't know how many years we've done this, three, four, but I appreciate you joining me here.
Yeah, happy to do it. I love talking football and just looking forward to finally getting the games instead of just feeling like we can pretend we know what we're doing, right?
That's right. Well, and that Big 12 Media Day is always kind of that. They always say it's the unofficial kickoff to the season, and it is. I mean, once you go there, it's like, all right, this is around the corner now. I don't know when Utah starts camp. I know Colorado starts it here as we're doing this in about 10 days or so.
Yeah, I think Utah will start the 30th, so that's
Okay.
probably about the same. Yep, yep.
Yeah. Colorado starting July 28th. So it seems like it starts earlier and earlier. I remember when it used to be August camp. Now it's starting July. But uh, well, we're going to talk about the
Fall camp.
Utes. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's fall camp, but it's always in the summer, but
Yeah.
late summer. But we're going to talk about the Utes, who obviously, last year did not have a great year. And Buff fans were more than happy to take advantage of that. As Utah came to Boulder and um, C was able to overwhelmingly snap that losing streak to the Utes and kind of handle them pretty easily. But it's going to be a much different year, I think, for Utah this year.
Yeah, it's funny because when you and I did this last time, I feel like I still said some glowing things about Utah. We thought that they were going to be good,
Mhm.
but there was still this nagging feeling that they weren't the team that they needed to be. And so I
Mhm.
think, they've built their roster so much better this year in terms of being able to absorb any of the problems that they may have, right? I think they've learned over the last few years that you can't just fully rely on an injury-prone Cam Rising, but who knew a fluke injury like his would have happened. But I think they've done really well to kind of mitigate some of the problems that they had there. And so, there's a lot of optimism around this team again. I think the vibes are far better. I think, just as much as anybody covering a team, it's hard to quantify how you feel about a team sometimes because it's just
Yeah.
vibes.
Hmm.
And I think talking to these players and talking to the people involved with this on a day-to-day basis, they definitely feel like there's something different, right? They feel like there's something
Yeah.
that can make this team go. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to win a ton of games, but I think they're going to be a better team than they were last year, which isn't really saying much. Anybody
Yeah.
that went to that Colorado game knows that Utah was clearly not in a good state of mind, and it was just a terrible situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I did my written preview on Utah last month, and when I look at this team, um, I, I mean, I had to admire Cam Rising. I mean, he will probably forever be a Utah legend for taking them to back-to-back Pac-12 titles and Rose Bowls. But I feel like the fact that they're no longer pinning their hopes on him is a good thing for this program to move on from him. And that's a bad way to say it, but for 2 years now, they had kind of all right, it's Cam Rising, but then he gets hurt and it derails the season, and they were so bad without him. I just feel like it's a good thing that that's not a thing right now. That there is no chance of a Cam Rising. You had to move on from him, and I feel like that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it kind of like the dark cloud has been lifted from Utah, which sounds similarly to what you're saying. Is it doesn't sound right to say that Cam Rising was the dark cloud because he
Yeah,
wasn't.
right.
But I think it was just the overall situation that Utah was dealing with
Hmm.
that for 2 years in a row. I mean, you and I on the very last Pac-12 media days, we were observing whether Cam Rising was doing well with his knee or
Yeah,
doing different things that way. And it's just an interesting situation for a team to be in where you put all of your eggs in one basket and they really thought that they would be okay. And
hmm,
they could have been maybe, but I think it's a refreshing situation for Utah because they don't have this hanging over their heads. They've got, a new system. They feel like they're in a good spot on offense, even though, it's a guy that is new to the system in terms of Utah. But at the same time, they feel like they've just got so much more flexibility available to them that they didn't have with Cam, even though Cam took them to new heights and areas that they are, like you said, are always going to celebrate and they're going to consider him as a legend.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. I do feel bad almost saying that about Cam Rising, but sometimes it's a good thing. I mean, when a player is I felt we were talking about the Rockies before we started this. Like, it was almost like a good thing when the Rockies kind of, you got to move on from Todd Helton, because towards the end of his career, not the same player. Things that so that happens a lot in sports. But this Utah team, no more Cam Rising. Let's move on. This Utah team, Devin Dampier, the new quarterback, new system, you said, but he's got his offensive coordinator that he had at New Mexico last year, Jason Beck, the former BYU quarterback. It's not often that you bring in the transfer quarterback who also gets to bring in his offensive coordinator. How big of a deal is that Devin's got Coach Beck with him?
I think it's huge. I mean, this is an offensive coordinator that took a team in New Mexico to the fourth best offense in the country.
Hmm.
With a team, let's be honest, they're not going to be on par with a lot of these Big 12 teams. And so the fact that he was able to do that shows the level of talent. Now, if Kyle Whittingham truly gives him the autonomy that he said he did that he will at Big 12 Media Days, that's a huge boon for success at Utah in the sense that you have now the offensive coordinator that knows the plays. You've
Yeah.
got the quarterback who has done everything for that, and now it's bringing everybody along. The
Hmm.
nice thing there too is there's not a lot of scar tissue left over from that offense because they basically gutted the entire offense. And
Right.
so anybody that was maybe trying to hold on and say, "Hey, this is not the way that we like to do it," with Andy Ludwig is gone. And so I think
Yeah.
this is a really nice fresh start. It's a fresh start with a lot of consistency behind it, if that makes sense. And so I think they can hit the ground running in a way that they probably couldn't had they just hired an offensive coordinator without the quarterback. So I think they're in a good spot. We'll see how it all comes together ultimately, but I think they can absolutely be a menace just simply because they've got that consistency and flow.
Yeah. And the one thing about Utah last year is that yes, Cam gets hurt, but I was surprised at how they were just so inept without him. I mean, they really couldn't do a lot of anything. And their bread and butter is, even with Cam, as good as he was, their bread and butter is you're able to run the football, and they weren't able to do that very well last year. But they do have, you mentioned it's gutted. I think they have all five offensive linemen back this year,
Yep.
including Spencer Fano, who was an All-American last year. And not only do they add, oh my gosh, the quarterback, we just talked about him, Dampier, but
Dampier.
a couple of running backs. I mean, they got New Mexico's running back. They've also got Wayshawn Parker from Washington State, who I love. I love him in Utah's offense. I think all of a sudden you look at this Utah team like they're going to run the ball a lot better and they're going to throw the ball a lot better.
Well, this is an offense that's completely different from what Andy Ludwig had. Andy
Yeah,
Ludwig, you had to be a disciple of his offense to be able to understand it. And that's what made Cam so great, is he understood it as well as Andy did. So they could do anything.
yeah,
But the second you got that out, last year you have a true freshman quarterback stepping in, you just don't have that understanding.
hmm,
And so all of that trickled down into a lot of frustrations. This year, it's much more open, it's RPO based. Offenses that are very similar to what kids are running in high school. They're used to the spread style offenses now. And so you're going to see things that are going to be much easier for these guys to pick up. So even if there are some problems and they may not know everything exactly, you can have a much less learning curve trying to get there. They've
yeah,
got a complete offense where they're going to utilize that run game, whether it be Devin Dampier, Wayshawn Parker, even Nate Johnson, who came back, who was a quarterback a couple years ago. He's coming in as this quote unquote Swiss Army knife.
mhm.
You can utilize him kind of like the Britton Covey, anybody that remembered him. This becomes an opportunity for them to be able to have a ton of balance there where they can rely on the run and establish kind of their identity that's always been there. And then if they can get those vertical threats, which they have to do, whether that
Yeah,
be with the tight end game that's been strong for them or these new wide receivers that are coming in, now you've got a completely different offense. They're using more screen passes. They're using more, variability in kind of what they're doing to be able to mix it up instead of the same inside zone. We're just going to cram it into this A
yeah.
gap, and A gap's got six guys already there. It's going to be a far different offense, and I think it's refreshing to anybody there that they don't have to feel like they're just running the same thing that never worked.
Yeah, I want to ask you one last question on offense with Dampier. Are people sleeping on him a little bit? He obviously was highly productive, put up big numbers in Mexico, or is there some cautious optimism because it's a big jump, uh, not a massive jump, but it is a big jump going to Power Four football where he's going to have to play, Power Four schedule where he didn't have to play that last year in New Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're sleeping on him. I mean, I think if you compare his numbers with John Mateer, they're closer than many
Mhm.
people want to admit. Now, with that said, his completion percentage isn't as high. He
Mhm.
also has a higher turnover to interception ratio. So I mean, there those are the concerns that people have, and those are valid concerns.
Yeah.
But I think when you're comparing players where one went to Oklahoma, who's getting a ton of praise, and everybody's saying, "Oh, he's the next godsend at Oklahoma." I think that's similar for Devin Dampier if he can get that completion percentage up and get those turnovers down.
Yeah.
With his level up in the competition, he's now going up against a defense in Utah that is one of the best consistently. And so I think he's understanding it at a better level. I think he said it best at media days where he said it at New Mexico. I would go out there in fall camp and my offense would run and we would do well and we thought we were great. And they were, admittedly.
Mhm.
Like they went to the number four, they were the fourth best team,
Yeah.
but you're not seeing it at the same level where you say, okay, the things that worked here aren't going to work against, an Iowa State or somebody else. And, he's got that now. There's still going to
Yeah.
be some level of intrigue there in terms of what he's able to do. But I think he's making the right steps and understanding that he's not a developed product yet. He's still got some things. So he's
Yeah.
undervalued, but I'd say he's still got to prove himself for people to really value him. But I think the second he takes off, like if he breaks off in this UCLA game, I could see the national media completely turning in on him and saying he's the next,
Yeah.
guy that people are going to watch.
Yeah, I don't remember who I voted to be the newcomer of the year in the Big 12, but he's a guy that's got to be on that short list. For me, coming into the year of a guy that watch out because he's got being a quarterback and the numbers he's put up. I think he's got that shot. And sort of transition. You mentioned, look, if he can look good in practice against the Utah defense, you can probably look good most Saturdays. So that Utah defense, you know, as I wrote in my written preview last month the defense was not the problem last year for Utah. They were still a top 25 defense, and several guys are gone from that, but several guys are back, including Morgan Scalley, who that defense is just always salty. I mean, to me, I pencil in Utah as like, all right, good defense. Is it going to be great or not? But I pencil in good. So tell me about that defense. Are they good? Great. How do you see that defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're on that good to potentially great area. They've lost enough players that there's still some questions, especially on the defensive line. Although defensive line is hardly ever a question at Utah, regardless
Right.
of who is coming in.
Yeah.
I think they have enough veteran talent, especially in that linebacker room, where they're bringing back all their guys. They're bringing back a guy in Levani Damuni who, started at Stanford,
Mhm.
got injured last year, so he wasn't able to play. He's back in there. Lander Barton, who's been an All-American type candidate type player. He's fully healthy. He's not dealing with a nagging injury that he was dealing with last year. And you've got a Jonathan Hall, who's an up and coming linebacker that's just he hits hard.
Yeah.
And so you've got this nice central core there mixed in with Smith Snowden, who is going to play nickel or at corner. You've got safeties that are going to be pretty dynamic, who have been great at what they do. I think there's not a lot of problems with this defense, at least initially, right? Like I'm curious
Yeah.
to see how it develops. But I think looking at this defense, you have to at least think that they're going to be even a little bit better than last year. I think even their pass rushing game could be even a step up from last year. They didn't create a lot of havoc plays despite all that they were able to do on defense. They gave up way too much in the run game.
Yeah.
That's one thing that really drove them crazy in the offseason that they did not want. And so I think you're going to see a big emphasis on trying to control the line of scrimmage more, trying to be much more physical, trying to get in that backfield and make some havoc plays. And I think they have the guys to do it. It's just a matter of staying healthy and being able to continue that legacy that Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley have created there of just a salty defense that's going to destroy you.
Yeah, I mean, Utah's one of those teams I look at that, hey, it's a good thing Colorado got them last year because you want to get Utah when they're down. Because to me, they're not going to be down very long. As long as Kyle Whittingham is there, and who knows how long he's there. I believe he said at Big 12 Media Day that had they won a title last year, maybe he wouldn't be there this year. Is that what he said?
Yeah, he's hinting more and more to that, even though he's tried to not.
Yeah,
The general sense was last year that it was going to be his last year, and
yeah,
had Utah had a consistent season, not even necessarily winning the conference, but had they been better and gone to a bowl, I honestly think it would have been his last season. So,
yeah.
I think if they win, 8 games or so this year, I wouldn't at all be surprised if he walks away.
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting one to watch. I mean, he's obviously Morgan Scalley is the coach in waiting and has been for a year or two now. So, but I just feel like Utah's gonna be back. I mean, I don't know how good you think they're gonna be, but I you saw I think you retweeted it recently that they were picked by somebody to win the conference, right?
Yeah, these are the betting odds, and
Yeah, it was the betting odds. That's what it was.
fans haven't been too happy about that here.
Yeah.
You have FanDuel, you have those offshore betting sites that
Mhm.
suddenly have switched to have Utah as their favorite, and so I think you're seeing that you're getting some respect of how the consistency's been there. It's betting odds, right? Like
All right.
if any of
Yeah.
us through I mean you and I do AP top 25, we do those types of things.
Hmm.
It's a crapshoot a lot of these times. So it's interesting, but I think that shows the respect that people have for Kyle Whittingham, that even though you had a bad season, you went 5-7 and clearly it just was not what you wanted. Utah on paper at the very least is better than what they were last year. So we'll
Yeah.
see. But I think you have to like this team and believe that they can be better than they were last year.
Yeah, you mentioned AP top 25. It's interesting when that comes out to see if Utah will be in there or not. If they are, it's because of that respect for Kyle Whittingham. If they're not, I just feel like they're going to be there at some point. And as I've talked to writers around the Big 12, there's really 6 or 7 teams you look at and say, yeah, they're in contention for this conference title. There is no one clear favorite. Is that how you see it? I mean, you could name off Iowa State, Kansas State, TCU, Texas Tech, Arizona State, Utah. There's about 6 or 7 teams you can name and say, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if any one of those teams won it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like going into this, I was preparing for the Big 12 media poll that we didn't get to do,
Yeah.
and which is fine.
Yeah.
It was really tough for me to just feel really definitive about certain teams, right? I feel
Yeah.
like if you wanted me to tier this conference, I feel like I could kind of get in a better
Hmm.
mojo. But I just until somebody steps up and really continues to take it on, I just think there's just so much opportunity available in this conference. Utah and Colorado both experienced this in the Pac-12 for a few years before teams started to kind of separate. But I just think that's kind of the evolution of this sport. And I think what your Mark said about, them needing a few elite teams is true. I think the Big
Yeah.
12, maybe it's Arizona State, maybe it's Utah, whoever it may be. I think they need some of these teams to step up for the Big 12 to start getting a little bit more recognition. Are they still going to
Yeah.
be on par with the Big 10 SEC? No, but I think you do have to start getting that. It's easy to tout parity and tout that things are going well, but I think you do need to start seeing that separation. And I'm curious to see if we get some of that this year, if it's still a crapshoot.
Yeah, and that parity, I mean, I agreed with him last year. It was probably was the deepest conference in the country, and probably will be this year. It made for some great football. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting all the way down to the wire last year, but it didn't create a lot of great teams. And so we'll see what happens this year. But I like Utah. I think Utah is going to be in that mix, and I'm curious to see where they wind up. And so, just before we get out of here, your final assessment: where does this team land? Is this Kyle Whittingham's last year because they're so good? What happens?
Yeah, I think for this Utah team, 8 wins is the floor. I
Mhm.
think they would expect that to kind of be where they are. I do think they can compete for a championship. They've got a great schedule where all of the top teams that they're going to face, or at least a majority of the top teams that they're going to face, are coming into Rice-Eccles Stadium, which generally speaking has been a rough place to play. Last year it
Mhm.
was not, but that was a different issue.
Yeah.
You then also get a 6 week stretch where you don't even have to leave the state. Your only away game is at BYU, so you're not leaving far. So, if they can do well, they've got everything lined up for them to be able to be successful. It's not going to be an easy path. They obviously have to be improved, but I think this team, as I said, 8 is kind of the floor, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're hovering around 10 wins, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they're not. So
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see this team. I think, like I said at the beginning, the vibes are pretty good for this team. I think they've got kind of that mindset that nobody believes in them, and they're not satisfied with how last year was. And so until they prove otherwise, I have to say that I think they're going to be pretty solid.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm looking forward to another trip out there. I will say every time I leave Rice-Eccles, I have to you have to rub the eyes and get the red out because it's just so red in that
Yeah.
stadium. And it is such a for anybody that hasn't been out there, it is it's an underrated hard place to play in the country, I think. And it's a daunting place. I feel like every time you go in there, because it's been sold out, I think it's 89 straight sellouts, something like that. That's a lot of years. It's so loud, it's so red. I think it's a hard place to play. And I think all the years I've seen Colorado there, I'm not sure they've ever played super well out there. And so, um, I know Buff fans are hoping for something different, but props to Utah because that's a tough place to play. Those fans really come out and support their team, and so that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, they love it. I mean, I think that's what was so hard last year is like they wanted to be at the games and celebrate this team, but
Mhm.
it was just so hard. So
Yeah.
they're excited, right? Like they're excited to get these back and show the Big 12 what this team really can be. Obviously they came into the Big 12 thinking, pounding their chest, thinking that they were going to go win the conference and
Mhm.
maybe could have. But I think now that they want to see kind of some redemption for themselves and say, hey, look, this is this Utah team and this is how we actually play football.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. We'll see you in Salt Lake City later this year.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, Ryan.